Panama looks like a thin strip of land on the map, almost like a mistake between two oceans. But this tiny country controls one of the most valuable shortcuts ever built. The Panama Canal is not just a waterway. It is a price tag on time. Every ship that crosses it is paying to avoid a longer, slower, more dangerous route around South America. That is the whole business model. Panama sells distance back to the world before the canal. Moving goods between the Atlantic and Pacific could mean sending ships all the way around Cape Horn at the bottom of South America. That route was long, expensive, and dangerous. Storms, delays, fuel costs, and distance made global trade slower. Then Panama changed the map. A ship could enter from the Caribbean, rise through massive locks, cross an artificial lake, cut through the mountains, descend on the other side, and reach the Pacific. The route is only about 80 kilometers, but economically it behaves like a tunnel through a continent. That is why the canal matters so much. It is short in distance but huge in value. Panama does not need to manufacture the cargo. It does not need to own the ships. It does not need to control the companies selling the goods. It only needs to sit at the point where the world wants to pass through. That position turned geography into power. Every year, thousands of ships use the canal. They carry containers, grain, gas, chemicals, cars, machinery, and raw materials. Some of that cargo is headed toward American ports. Some is moving between Asia, Europe, and Latin America. Some is part of energy supply chains. Some is part of ordinary consumer life, the kind of trade people only notice when it gets delayed. That is the strange thing about the Panama Canal. When it works normally, most people forget it exists. When it gets disrupted, everyone suddenly remembers that the global economy still depends on physical routes. The modern world loves to talk about software, artificial intelligence, finance, and digital platforms, but the real economy still needs ships. Phones, food, fuel, furniture, medicine, factory parts, and construction materials have to move through physical space. The internet can move information instantly, but it cannot teleport a container. Panama controls one of the places where that physical world becomes narrow, and narrow places are powerful. The canal opened in 1914 after one of the most difficult engineering projects in history. The French tried first and failed. Disease, landslides, heat, finance problems, and impossible terrain crushed the early effort. The United States later took over the project, helped separate Panama from Colombia, and built the canal as both an engineering achievement and a strategic asset. For most of the 20th century, the canal was not fully Panama's. The United States controlled the canal zone, which made Panama a sovereign country with a foreign-controlled corridor running through its most valuable territory that created a deep political wound. The canal was the thing that made Panama globally important, but for decades Panama did not fully control it. The handover in 1999 was therefore not just an administrative event. It was the moment Panama took control of the asset that defined its place in the world. Since then, Panama has managed the canal as a national business. Ships pay tolls, and those tolls are not just fees for water. They are payments for saved time, saved fuel, and saved risk. A company will pay hundreds of thousands of dollars, sometimes more, because the alternative can be slower and more expensive. That is what makes the canal so profitable. It does not sell a product you can hold in your hand. It sells a shortcut, and the value of a shortcut depends on what the world is trying to move. When global trade is strong, demand rises. When energy markets shift, tankers matter. When supply chains change, container routes adjust. When war or tension makes other choke points dangerous, ships look for safer paths. The canal sits inside all of that. But the Panama Canal has one weakness that makes the whole system more fragile than people expect: water. Most people imagine the canal as a sea-level channel, like a long trench between two oceans. That is not how it works. Ships are lifted and lowered through locks using fresh water. Gatun Lake, created for the canal. is part of the system that allows ships to cross Panama. Every transit uses a huge amount of fresh water. That water does not simply stay inside the locks forever. Much of it is released toward the sea. This means the canal is not only a shipping project, it is a water management project. And that is where the problem begins. Panama is powerful because of water, but Panama is also vulnerable because of water. During severe drought, the canal cannot simply operate at full strength. If lake levels fall, authorities have to reduce ship drafts, limit the number of daily transits, or force companies to wait. That means fewer ships, higher costs, and more pressure on global supply chains. The drought crisis of 2023 and 2024 showed the world that even one of the most important trade routes on Earth can be slowed down by climate and water scarcity. This is what made the story so important. A canal that connects oceans can still run out of usable fresh water. That sounds almost absurd, but it is the central tension of Panama's future. The canal needs water for ships, and Panama City also needs water for people. The same system that supports global trade also supports local life. When rainfall is low, the country has to balance ships, citizens, revenue, ecosystems, and politics. That is why Panama has looked at new reservoir projects. The logic is simple. If the canal needs reliable water, the country needs more storage, but the politics are not simple. Reservoirs can flood communities, move families, and create environmental conflict. For people living near affected rivers, the canal is not just a national treasure. It can become a threat to their land, so Panama's greatest asset creates a difficult question. How much should local communities sacrifice to protect a global trade route? This is where the story becomes bigger than shipping. The canal is not only about economics. It is about who benefits from infrastructure and who pays the hidden cost. Panama earns billions from the canal, but the canal also shapes the country's politics, land use, water policy, and foreign relations. It is the center of national identity and national pressure at the same time. There is also a geopolitical layer. The United States has always cared about the canal because American trade and military strategy depend on movement between oceans. China cares because global shipping and port infrastructure are part of its economic reach. Latin America cares because the canal connects the region to world markets. Shipping companies care because route decisions can change profits. This makes Panama more important than its size suggests. A small country can become powerful when it controls a choke point. Panama does not need to be a superpower. It only needs to control a place that superpowers, companies, and markets cannot ignore. That is why political arguments around the canal never fully disappear. Whenever fees rise, influence shifts, or foreign companies operate near the canal, bigger countries start paying attention. The waterway may be Panamanian territory, but it sits inside a global power game. And Panama has to manage that carefully. If it appears to close to one power, another gets nervous. If it raises prices too aggressively, customers complain. If it expands capacity, environmental and social problems grow. If it does not expand, ships may choose other routes. If drought gets worse, the whole business model becomes harder to protect. This is the pressure of owning a shortcut. A shortcut is valuable only if it stays reliable. That is why the canal expansion was such a major move. The newer locks allowed much larger ships to pass, especially important for modern container traffic and energy shipments. Bigger ships mean more cargo per transit, more revenue potential, and more relevance in a world where vessels keep growing, but expansion also made the water question more serious. Larger vessels and growing demand mean the canal must serve a shipping industry that wants more capacity, while the climate may deliver less certainty. That conflict will define Panama's next decades. The canal's future is not just about concrete, locks, and tolls. It is about whether Panama can secure enough water to keep selling speed to the world. If it can, the country remains one of the most important trade points on Earth. If it cannot, companies will reroute, costs will rise, and Panama's influence will weaken. The alternatives are not simple. Ships can go around South America, but that adds time and fuel. Some cargo can move through the Suez Canal, but that route has its own geopolitical risks. Rail and land bridges can help in specific cases, but they cannot replace the canal at full scale. Shipping networks can adapt, but adaptation is expensive. This is why Panama still matters. The canal is not irreplaceable in theory, but it is extremely hard to replace in practice. Global trade is built around efficiency, and the Panama Canal is one of the reasons certain routes are efficient in the first place. The moment that efficiency becomes uncertain, the cost spreads. A delayed ship can delay inventory, a rerouted cargo can raise fuel costs. Higher shipping costs can affect prices, a blocked route can force companies to rethink supply chains. The canal is only 80 kilometers long, but its impact reaches far beyond Panama. That is the hidden power of infrastructure. It does not have to be loud, it just has to be necessary. Panama's story also shows something important about geography. Some countries become rich because they have oil. Some because they have labor, some because they build technology. Panama's advantage is location, but location alone is not enough. A country has to turn location into a system. Panama did that with locks, ports, logistics, banking, services, and canal management. The canal became the anchor and other economic activity grew around it. The country became a connector between oceans, between markets, between shipping companies and global trade. But being a connector can be uncomfortable. The world depends on Panama, yet Panama depends on the world. If trade slows, the canal feels it. If shipping changes, Panama must adapt. If climate pressure rises, the country has to spend money and political capital to protect the route. That makes Panama powerful, but not invincible. The same narrow geography that gives it influence also creates risk. There is no second Panama Canal sitting next to the first one. There is no unlimited freshwater reserve waiting to solve every drought. There is no way to completely separate local life from global demand. Everything is connected. That is the real reason Panama is such a strong story. It is not just a country with a canal. It is a country where geography, engineering, money, climate, sovereignty, and global trade all meet in one narrow strip of land. A ship crosses in hours. But behind that crossing is more than a century of politics, labor, disease, empire, engineering, water management, and national ambition. Panama turned a narrow piece of land into one of the most important economic shortcuts in the world, and now the country has to protect that shortcut in a century where water is becoming less predictable, ships are getting bigger, and global power is becoming more tense. The world sees the Panama Canal as a route. Panama sees it as revenue, identity, and leverage, but the future may see it as something even more important, proof that the global economy depends on fragile physical systems, more than we like to admit, because every time a ship enters those locks, it is not only crossing Panama, it is buying time from a country that learned how to make the world pay for geography.